Okay, this is the video for Module 6, and I know that on the last module, toward the end of the module, I kept saying Module 6. I don't know why. Probably because I'm at least a module ahead of you guys, and I'm usually thinking about the next one and what assignments are going into that and so forth. Anyway, I apologize for that. This is definitely Module 6 video, and so let's get to the reading. In the spring book, you are going to read about the beginnings of the bureaucracy and organization of the American school system. Once population starts increasing around the country, and once the common school idea kicks off and becomes popular around the country, many more students are enrolling, and hence you have a much larger general school population. So how do you manage this? How do you organize this? What is the basic structure? We end up having to, in this part of the history, focus on building infrastructure. So they build infrastructure. They need a stable workforce of teachers, okay, be they men or women. And of course, we find out that they much more become females as time goes on, for several different reasons. And you'll do an activity that will give you an option to do, look into that a little bit. You need to standardize things, standardize the organization of the schools, which leads to the age-graded classroom. You have to standardize the curriculum, hopefully, at least in certain areas. You need some sort of oversight committee, or you need some sort of institutional committee or department, that can oversee all of the schools in a district and so forth. So you start to see a lot of the organizations with the superintendents at the head of the district, and these types of structures put in place during this time. And of course, instruction changes as well. And you'll see that there is a big difference in the way that many educators, especially in Europe at the time, view how to best educate the child. And so it moves away from this rote memorization and drill and kill and these types of activities. Recitation, that was a big method before this time. And it starts to move away from that with the great thinkers of educational, interests like Pestalozzi that you're going to learn about in this particular chapter, and others. There are many others. But you're going to basically examine how many of these methods, these ideas about the child and how the child learns, definitely change quite a bit. In Darling Hammond, you're reading chapter 4, and that chapter was on the inequality on trial. It's the name of the chapter, but essentially she talks about a lot of the different lawsuits that came about as a result of the unequal distribution of financial resources across school districts. I mean, let's face it, there are property poor districts, property poor areas that essentially are getting much less than some of the higher, since most funding is based on property taxes. It leads to this unequal distribution of resources. So, there have been many lawsuits that have been brought across history, and she talks about these, and it essentially asks the question, they challenge it according to the 14th Amendment. Of course, the 14th Amendment was one of the Civil War amendments, and it was under the 14th Amendment has a lot of stuff in it, but the main part of the 14th Amendment is the equal protection under the law. If you establish a bunch of standards that students must meet in order to go on to the next grade, then what responsibility does the district have to make sure that you have the equitable, the appropriately trained teachers, the good curriculum in place, all of the resources needed in the school setting in order to help students achieve those high standards that the state has now set. And if all of those resources are not put in place, are they meeting that standard of the 14th Amendment? And that's the equal protection under the law. Some states, each state has had its own sort of ruling about those types of things, and you'll learn more about a lot of the different lawsuits that were brought up with relation to that. But I think that what's really at the heart of this is a statement that she says in this particular chapter, if I can remember it, but it has to do with it's not really about what's best for the children, what's best for the students. It's really about whether the state is meeting its minimally adequate educational standards. So that's kind of an interesting perspective from that chapter. That's what we get from that. But she also gives some interesting remedies. She does discuss, this is what could fix this. This is how these things could, or how better schooling could be implemented if we did these things. So it's an interesting perspective that she takes. And then of course Ravitch gives us a great example of one of the very beginnings of the business model of schooling and school districts, and that's in San Diego. And what happens when you put a non-educator, a businessman, in charge of an entire school system, and you tell him, hey, shape up the schools, make it work. And we're talking again about a non-educator who doesn't understand a lot of the intricacies of how educational systems work. And of course, he's going to present it, or he's going to approach it from a business standpoint, this sort of get tough attitude that they did in San Diego. So you're going to read about that. And I think, honestly, it's hard to look at it as anything other than a top-down, mandated, centralized control system at its worst, really. But needless to say, it becomes the model for many other districts, including the next chapter in Ravitch, which won't be this week, it'll be next week, which has to do with New York City, picking up from where San Diego leaves off. So, all right, so there's no, we're not going to do a discussion post this week. We'll take a break from that, but you do have an activity to do. You'll see it on your checklist, and it deals with the chapter 6. You have a choice. It's a attempt at differentiated instruction. You can choose one of the 3 to answer, and then I've created a Dropbox thing for you to go ahead and turn that in. It's just about a page, I guess, or not even, however long it takes you to answer that particular activity. Let's see, you need to take the quiz number 3, and you need to pick out a presentation project topic. And you need to email me and make sure that I know what you're thinking about doing. And I'm trying to help you get the ball rolling for what the presentation project that is due toward the end of the semester. And then there are some of you who still have not emailed me your placement for your field experience. So please do that ASAP. I think that's it. Next Tuesday, the 11th, I'm going to show Lolly's Kin. Once again, I've heard from a couple of you about it. It'll be at noon in room 627 Adderhold. I hope to see many of you there if you can make it. And I think that is it for Module 6. So I will talk to you again in Module 7.